Regulatory oversight is evolving quickly for financial advisors. Well, I'm with today H. David Kotz, who's literally written the book on the subject, the former Inspector General of the SEC. Welcome.
Thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about what's next for regulatory oversight for financial advisors.
Yeah, well, there's lots going on, as many people know. Obviously the fiduciary rule is a big issue. You got the SEC issuing one, you got Department of Labor. So, the latest we hear is the SEC's one will come out potentially next October, so that'll be a while. Department of Labor is looking at the first half of 2016. There are Republicans in Congress who are trying to stop it really right now through this omnibus bill, which will be decided about December 18th. So that's going on. That's obviously a big critical issue. Although it expands the broker-dealer side, when you harmonize regulations, it's going to affect the investment advisors. You also have cybersecurity is a big priority for the SEC. And the SEC did these exams, and they found, in their view, that investment advisors are not doing as good a job as broker-dealers on cybersecurity. So they're going to try to come down hard on them. You got Department of Treasury with a new AML standard and requirements for investment advisors as well. Those are just a few of the things going on. Regulation just keeps coming at people, heavy and fast, and it's really hard to keep up.
Now let's talk about the fiduciary rule first. It's going to come at it from two different angles. How are these proposals different, and where could this fiduciary rule ultimately look like, and how could it affect advisors?
Yeah, so it's all up in the air. I mean, it's a little crazy, quite frankly. You have potentially two different rules coming out that could be very different. It looks like Department of Labor is going to be much stricter than the SEC. The SEC has to get it through a sort of a divided commission. You have two new Republicans coming in shortly. Two new commissioners coming in, one Republican, one Democrat. So they're going to have to figure things out. My sense is the SEC one will be much more watered down. Department of Labor, if they're able to get it through and survive the budget issue, could be much tougher. So it's going to be difficult to figure out which one you have to comply with. There's talk about the SEC coordinating with Department of Labor, but in my experience, government agencies don't coordinate that well together. So it could be a real difficulty. And as they try to harmonize things, there are going to be changes that affect investment advisors, and it's hard to know right now what exactly they'll be.
You've always been fairly, you gain a reputation being fairly tough on the SEC, especially under, what do you think of where they're at right now?
Yeah, so in my job as Inspector General, I obviously had to do oversight, and there were things that we found during my time there. I think the big problem with the SEC is it's hard to get a consensus. You have different commissioners who are very much at odds. I don't think it's going to help the new people that are coming in, one from the left, one from the right, have pretty strong views. So it's hard for them to get agreement on anything. And it's difficult to govern that way. There have been a lot of improvements in the SEC since I went there, and since Madoff and Stanford and some of these scandals. There's no question. They've done some good things. But my concern is just sort of the redundant and overlapping regulations. You got the SROs, you got the states, you got the SEC. They don't always coordinate. You can be an investment advisor just trying to do your business, and you get called in by the SEC, and then a month later by FINRA, and then a month later by the state, and it's hard to keep up, and it's hard to get back to what you really should be doing. And the uncertainty also, I think, is very difficult for people in business.
Do you ever think we'll see harmonization, or is that impossible?
Harmonization was actually a big push right after the financial crisis. And, they had all these task forces, and, they made some progress. There was talk about combining the CFTC and the SEC, which I thought made some sense, and that never happened. My sense is if it didn't happen then, it's not going to happen now. Things are more partisan, things are more difficult to come together. A big issue for the SEC and CFTC is just the congressional committees that they are involved in. So if they combine them, one committee loses power. That's not going to happen. So my sense is you won't have harmonization. If they could try to harmonize some of the rules, that would be good. But again, I found when we looked at situations where the SEC and other agencies were trying to coordinate, I didn't find a lot of effective coordination going on. There's sometimes turf wars, and it doesn't always work that well.
Now, you've written the book on regulation and compliance. I think a really interesting read here for advisors. as you look ahead to 2016, what's the one piece of regulation they should be preparing themselves for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fiduciary rule is something that's going to affect them. But, you know, I think cybersecurity, I think, is a key in terms of exams. You know, obviously that's a big concern for investment advisors. They come with the exams. I think the SEC is going to be really focused on that. You know, they already brought one enforcement action. You know, you have a situation where there's a breach, so obviously there's a problem, and then the SEC comes in afterwards and fines you for, you know, not having policies in place to avoid the breach. So it just makes it worse. I think in terms of a focus in examinations, I think cybersecurity is going to be the big one in 2016.
So cybersecurity, the fiduciary rule, sounds like a really active year ahead.
Absolutely. Keep your eye on the regulators and Capitol Hill for next year.
David, thank you so much for joining us today. Great insights.
Thank you.
For Investment News, I'm Matt Ackerman.
Lo mejor que